Welcome to IUSB. What follows is a short presentation to walk you through the English placement exam. We will begin with slides to walk you through some strategies for responding to the writing prompt and end with slides to help you acclimate to the online space and walk you through the exam itself. To begin, the most important thing to note is that it's important that you take your time and that you're thoughtful as you respond to the exam. You have 75 minutes to complete the exam, which should be plenty of time, but it's important to note that you want to utilize this time to best effect. The results on the exam, in fact, determine how many English classes you will need to take as an incoming student in IUSB. Many incoming students need to take a full year of first-year writing or English composition. However, those who are particularly successful on the exam may only need to take a single semester of first-year writing. So obviously, the results of the exam can affect how quickly you can graduate, but most importantly, you want to take your time, be thoughtful, and do your best so that we're sure we can place you in a course that's appropriate for your writing skill level. In a few minutes, you'll receive 2 writing prompts, and we ask you to skim through them relatively quickly and then pick the one that you like the best and write in response to that prompt. You should pick the prompt that you find the most understandable, relatable, or inspiring. So here we're going to walk through an example prompt, but obviously the example is not one of the 2 prompts you'll receive in a few minutes. But the key is every prompt has 3 basic parts, and that's what we're going to walk through here. The first part is an introduction to an excerpt from an academic text. In our example, it reads, "Consider the following passage defining literacy, adapted from the Introduction to a College Writing Text by Sarah Garnes." The most important things you need to note here are obviously the title of the passage and the author's name, because you'll want to refer to these things in your own writing. So you'd say something like, Sarah Garnes, author of Defining Literacy, and summarize some of the important points from the excerpt. Once you've referred to the author by full name and introduced the title of the excerpt, you can simply refer to the author by last name throughout the remainder of your writing response. The second part of every prompt is the excerpt itself. So once you've picked the prompt you want to write in response to, you'll read back through it much more carefully. Good reading and good writing go hand in hand, so it's important that you're attentive as you reread the prompt that you want to respond to. As you reread, you want to look for things we call key terms, which are basically themes or main ideas in a passage. You can usually recognize these because the author will use them multiple times in the passage. Usually the author goes to great length to carefully define the terms as well, because they want you, the reader, to understand those terms in a specific way. And again, the key terms are used to convey the main idea or ideas of a passage. So here's the second part of the prompt, an excerpt from an academic text with the key terms identified. You can see here the very first word in the prompt, literacy, comes back over and over again in this passage. So literacy is one of the main key terms. And in this case, the author wants us to understand that literacy can be a broader idea than simply reading and writing. She's arguing that literacy can involve adjusting to different communities, social situations, and cultural groups, and becoming literate in those communities and social situations. So once you've read the excerpt from the academic text, the second part of the prompt, you'll move on to the third part, which are questions to think about. The main thing to note here is you don't necessarily want to use these questions as a checklist. Instead, you could read through them and pick one of them to get you thinking. But more than anything, you want to remain mindful of the instructions guiding your response. So while you can pick one of these bullet points and use it to sort of inspire and shape your response, you still want to make sure that you're connecting the ideas in the passage to a personal example from your life or from the life of somebody you know, a real world experience. You want to try to use key terms to discuss your example, and you want to try to work with at least 2 specific quotations from the excerpt itself. So I'm going to walk you through that in a bit more detail in a few minutes here. This next part is about navigating the exam itself. So the first thing you'll see in the exam is the honor pledge. Here, you don't have to do anything except read through this and click go to the placement exam or go to the next screen. But essentially here, we just want to remind you that it's really important that you take your time, that you're thoughtful, and that you do your best. And you want to be honest and make sure that you're not cheating on this part of the exam. If you find someone that you view as a better writer and ask them to respond to the exam on your behalf, you're really doing yourself a great disservice, because chances are good you'll end up in a class that's not appropriate for your writing skill level and you'll struggle. So you want to make sure that you, in fact, are responding to the exam and that you're doing your very best. But once you've read this screen, you'll simply click Go to the Placement Exam. Once you click Go to the Placement Exam, you'll get this screen, which essentially walks you through some instructions for the exam. Once you open the exam, again, you'll choose one of two prompts, and you'll complete your essay response for that specific prompt. You'll have 75 minutes to respond to the exam, which should be plenty of time. You just want to make sure you take your time and that you're thoughtful. After you've skimmed through both prompts and decided which of the two prompts you want to write about, you want to make sure that you place an X or type an X in the box below the prompt that you do not wish to respond to. For the prompt you do choose to write about, you'll type your response directly into the box below that prompt. But it's very important you remember to type an X in the box below the prompt you do not wish to respond to. After you've read those instructions, you'll scroll down a bit and you'll get the fourth part of the instructions, which pertain to specifically how to respond to the writing prompt. So here we're coming back to and revisiting some of the instructions I referenced earlier. It's important that you analyze and evaluate the ideas in the passage you've read by connecting them with a detailed and specific example from your own experience or observation. So here when we say analyze, we want you to break down the ideas in the passage, idea by idea, thinking about how the different concepts work together. And when we say evaluate, we want you to try to make a judgment call. Do the ideas in the excerpt seem to hold up when you apply them to your specific example from your own experience, an example from the real world? One way to do this is to draw clear relationships between the ideas in the excerpt or passage you've read and your example from the real world by making use of key terms. So in the example prompt we looked at a few minutes ago, as you'll recall, one of the main key terms was literacy, and the author was arguing that literacy can involve familiarizing yourself with different social situations and groups. So you could use this idea of literacy and apply it to a story from your life about a time you joined a basketball team and how you became literate in the sport of basketball and the strategies and personalities of the people on that team. The last thing we ask you to do in this specific set of instructions when you're thinking about writing your response is make sure to provide two specific and direct quotations from the passage and use them in your own discussion. So when quoting, the main thing to note is you don't just want to sort of plunk the quote into your writing without a framework. Every quote should have a framework that helps your reader to understand. So you want to pretend that you're writing for an audience that's never read the excerpt or passage. And so you want to make sure before you pull in the quote that you provide some background. Make sure you provide your reader with enough information that they can understand the quotation. You want to try to integrate the quote into a sentence of your own. Sometimes this is as simple as saying something like Garms states. And then after you've used the quote, you want to make sure that you provide a sentence or two of your own to explain what the quote means in your own words. So these are the main steps that we ask you to think about and the instructions we want you to use to guide you as you respond to the writing prompt. After you've read these instructions and you feel fairly confident you understand them, you'll scroll down a bit and you'll get this last part of the instructions, which essentially direct you to contact the Gateway Information Center at IUSB if you have technical difficulties or problems as you respond to the exam. Once you have read all of these instructions, you'll then go ahead and skim through the writing prompts and decide which one you want to write in response to. You'll type an X into the box underneath the prompt you do not wish to write about, and you'll type your response underneath the prompt that you do wish to write in response to. Once you've completed the exam, you feel confident in your response, you'll click the next button at the bottom of the screen and you'll get some more information. But it's important to note here you will not see immediate results. The placement committee actually takes your response and reviews it, and so usually that takes a few days, in fact 7 to 10 days, and you don't see an immediate score or results after you respond to the exam. But once you've typed an X into the box below the prompt and that you do not wish to respond to, and typed your response below the prompt you do wish to respond to, you simply click the next button at the bottom of the screen. This is an example of what the X should look like in the box below the prompt you do not wish to respond to, just to reinforce that, because it is in fact an important step. And then you'll click Submit Quiz at the bottom of the screen once you're confident that you've completed the entire exam. And then you'll get this screen, which essentially congratulates you for finishing the English Placement Exam and notes that the English Placement Committee will review your exam. Usually this review process takes 7 to 10 days, so you'll want to check back into the placement office website in about 10 days. As final reminders, you have 75 minutes to complete the exam, which should be plenty of time. You want to make sure you place an X in the box below the prompt you have not chosen to write about, and then you'll type your response underneath the prompt you have chosen to write about in the box beneath that prompt. If you have time, take a few minutes and proofread. Should the 75 minutes allotted for the exam expire before you're finished, your response will simply automatically submit. So there's no need to rush because the placement exam committee will be able to see that you've got cut off and will take that into account as we evaluate your exam. You really, again, want to take your time, be thoughtful, and do your best. Thank you very much for your time. Best of luck on the English placement exam.